break.
Oh, good. Oh, there we go.
Oh, super. Jody, welcome from the Hamptons, live across the Atlantic. If I go down to the edge of the sea, I can wave at you on the other side. I'm over on the west coast of Ireland. We can wave across at each other. Welcome to the show, Jody. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure.
It's an absolute pleasure to have another author on the show with me today. And I'd love you to tell me the day or the moment or the activity or what happened when you actually turned around and went, you know what? I need to write a book about this. And your book is called A Small Agency's Guide to Winning New Business, 8 Steps to Winning More of the Right Kinds of Clients. And it's available on Amazon.com. So where were you? What was going on? What was the motivation?
Well, I'll tell you, the motivation, I don't know if it's going to be as romantic and glamorous as I think everyone expects, but a lot of it actually had to do with a coach that I was working with, because I think that all of us can get a lot out of working with someone objective and outside of our business. And in general, that's one of her big strategies is write a book, assert your authority. And I think that works for almost any professional service provider. And so at that point, I'd been working a lot with smaller agencies. I had zeroed in on the size of an agency between, say, I've worked with agencies that have been as small as 2 people, say 2 and 50 people. I'd already been zeroing in on the needs of the small agency owner, and I had thought, there's so much that they can do to control. I call it controlling their new business destiny, and I think a lot of that control has to do with mastering. There's mastering the logistical stuff, and there's mastering the technical stuff. But a lot of it has to do with mastering emotions and mindset, and the stuff that really gets in your way. And those are what the 8 steps mostly have to do with. There's a lot of practical information and practical advice, but a lot of it has to do with thinking about business development in a different way so that it's less scary and less unapproachable.
Awesome. That's definitely putting it on my reading list, seeing as I managed to start getting back to reading. One of the few benefits of this lockdown life that we're in. I actually picked up books again, which is brilliant. So I'll put that down on my list. You call yourself an accidental entrepreneur. How did you actually get into this roller coaster world of agency life?
Well, I had spent my career as a business development professional. And so that was probably the one constant. But the variations were, it was the business development professional for marketing services, creative services firms. And then within there's lots of variation. So I worked for digital agencies. I worked for massive global ad agencies and media buying and planning firms. I worked with smaller brand design agencies. I worked on the media side for a while. I worked with startups. So I got to see a lot of different forms of business development. And then, to be completely honest, and I suppose it also ties in interestingly with our time today, pardon me, is the recession of 2008, 2009 hit, and I was working for a large firm. I built up a great team where there had been no team before. I brought in a lot of wonderful systems. We were winning business that we had never won before. And the CEO had to make some really tough choices, tough cuts. And unfortunately, my department was one of the ones that was really cut. Sounds crazy, right? Business development being cut.
Yeah, sales. No.
Yeah, but I built a good enough team that they basically, I think the decision was, well, we've got this great team that she put in place. So I thought, well, while I'm looking for my next great opportunity, I might as well hang out a shingle and call myself a consultant. And lo and behold, I got a few projects that I really enjoyed. And a few years later, I actually did take another full-time job, and I went into it realizing wow, you know what? I'm ruined for life. I found it very hard to work for someone again, and I really enjoyed working for myself. I enjoyed the freedom. I enjoyed the ability to create something. And the other thing that's really interesting, and I see this a lot in some of the agencies I work with, is I was able to sort of grow into my own point of view in a way that I was never able to do as an employee. I think a lot of agency people and a lot of business development people at agencies tend to be real people pleasers, right?
Right.
And that can that only gets us so far, and sometimes it can be our worst enemy. So I realized that I was doing that way too much, and that as a outside consultant and coach, that was the worst thing that I can do, and the best thing I could do for my clients was to be very honest and maybe start to rewrite a lot of the rules that I lived by for a lot of my career.
Wow. Yeah.
So here I am.
Yeah, and here you are on the other side, enjoying the
Yeah,
freedom. And I think as females as well, we do. It is our natural tendency. It was kind of the way we were brought up, is to be
yeah,
a good girl and to say please and thank you. And we can naturally drift into that, and we have to relearn some ways of going, no, that's not good enough. Or actually, as especially when you're a coach and for your clients and you're coaching them through that mindset as well of going,
yeah.
being a people pleaser doesn't help them.
That's
Might
right.
be a nice thing to do, but it doesn't help that person. So New York life, I have to remember, I have to kind of go there. Like, I've been going over and back to New York for, God, years, right? Because
Yeah.
it's only a 5 hour flight from
Yes,
Ireland.
easy flight.
Yeah, it's a great flight. It's just hop and a skip. Very, very lucky. And of course, we've all watched like Sex in the City and the small apartment. So I'm having this vision of you scooting around, having your martinis in the advertising world. And tell us what it was like when you were living in New York through those times of, like, in the early years of you working in the ad
Wow.
agency. Give us some insights there.
Um, so, I guess in part ways, I was so lucky because a lot of my early career was in and around the dawn of the internet age. So I remember actually deciding whether or not to go to business school, and I had even applied to a few business schools, and it was right around the time that it's the time of trying to think of like the names of the companies that don't even exist anymore, but it was all the times of the first really big internet companies, the first search engines, the first content companies. And I thought, I
AOL,
could. It was, yeah, then known as America Online, not
America
as.
Online. Yeah, that's right.
And so I thought, well, I could invest in business school, or I could maybe invest in finding. Pardon me. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Finding it, or I could invest in finding a job at one of these new companies and like learn on the job. So I ended up with iVillage. I don't know if you remember them, another company that doesn't exist anymore, but they
Wow.
were a real content leader at the time. And so from iVillage, we basically were inventing what online media looked like, and we were getting, as a media sales team, we were getting appointments with really big brands and people at high levels at these big brands because no one knew what the answer was. And so we had a great time and we did great business. And then
Yeah.
from there, I went to RGA, where we started out as a tiny interactive team in a larger company. At the time, RGA was known for its visual effects, for its television commercial production, and for its graphics, its motion graphics. So we were a tiny group starting RGA and then really building it into, helping to build it into what it is today. And so I remember in those times thinking that I'm living in this very special moment where everything is changing. And New York was a fantastic place to be then.
I can
Um,
imagine.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just everyone in my circle was involved in digital media and that exciting, expansive feeling of growth and invention.
Yeah. But fantastic experience to be a part of. But New
Yeah,
York's had its downs as well.
yeah,
Were you there for 9/11? You've been through. Were you around at that time?
yeah.
And obviously 2008 you've mentioned as well.
Yeah, I was there for 9/11, and at the time I was working for a well-known but small branding design agency called Carbone Smolin, and they're actually still about a 40-person firm, pretty small, but they tend to work on very high-end projects. Our clients back then were Morgan Stanley, Christie's Auction House, the Louvre was a famous client of theirs. And so I remember one of the things I did as their business development lead was after the shock, after sort of all of us sitting in the office wondering what was going on, and then the decision to close the office and have everyone go home, and just being in the city that day was was an intense experience. But then getting back to work after a couple of days when we could start to travel through the city again, just reassuring the clients that we were working with, and reassuring especially the businesses that had either just given us, awarded us business, or had just, or were, sorry, what I'm thinking, either just awarded or were getting close to awarding
Got
us
it. Yeah.
business. So that was, I don't know if you can hear in the
I
background.
can hear the cat.
That is
That's
my
totally,
cat
that
in
is
the
totally fine.
background.
I am not going to tell you the amount of things and funny instances I have been a part of over the last. There's been children walking in. The other day I was on a call with a company and we were chatting away, and he goes, "I'm really sorry, the dog was barking." And he's gone, "I'm really sorry, the dog is barking." So he goes out to the dog, and the dog had found a rat in the
Oh my
garden.
goodness.
And he was dealing with that. And he comes back and he goes, "I'm so sorry." I said, "We're all trying to figure out what
Oh
we're
my
doing.
goodness.
Is the cat okay? What was the cat
Oh,
like?"
the cat.
Would the cat like to be on the show?
Everyone listening has just experienced my bizarre cat's morning routine, which he comes bursting back in from the outdoors and does like this crazy, as you all heard, this crazy yowl, and kind of runs around. And he's fine. It's just him expressing himself.
Oh, just like, "Oh, I'm here. Da-da." Right. Okay.
Kind of.
Thank
Yeah.
you for coming
Yeah.
back. Yes.
Oh boy.
Anyway, you were just
Yeah.
back from
So
9/11, and clients that just awarded you business or
it
about to
was,
award you business. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and it's really about especially people from outside the city. And I think this is a lesson that a lot of people can take to heart now. It's really going out to them and saying, look, we've just been through something pretty traumatic, but we're here, we're open, and we're equipped to work with you. And I think we're really feeling that now too, with agencies realizing, like, can we stay open? How do we work from home? How do we reassure our clients that we're fully functioning? And I remember one client in particular, they were they were in the South. I think they were in North Carolina. They really appreciated that. I realized after I got off the phone with them, I thought, wow, you know what? They almost pulled the business because they weren't sure what was happening in New
Right.
York, there in
Yeah.
the middle of North Carolina.
Yeah.
So that was a good, smart thing that I did, I
Yeah.
guess,
Also,
getting
I
back
think,
at it.
yeah, and this is kind of one of the things that we had just talked about this before the show is, while this is a new experience, there are many similar things that we have all been through before that we can still do. So you've brought something
Yeah,
really important home. If you're an agency and you're stressed and you're panicking about wondering what your clients are doing, the worst thing you can do is hide from them or ignore them or
that's right.
not speak to them. Over communication is probably the best thing to do right now. So that's a really good tip there, Jody,
Yeah,
about calling them and letting them know. I feel as well, most agencies were able to hop home, whereas a lot of
yeah.
clients haven't been able to do that because they just didn't have the infrastructure and the system set up. What other things, as you and I have been through lots of different experiences over the years, what else are you seeing that is similar, that is maybe reminding you of how you got through challenging times before?
Yeah, oh, that's a really good question. I think, I think also for someone who is on the sort of the latter half of one's career, let's put it that way, I think something that you realize also is that this stuff, we're going to get through this.
Yeah,
And it's probably not going to be easy. It may be harder than we expect, may not be as bad as we expect, but we're going to get through this, and there will be abundant days ahead. And there are also going to be more crappy days ahead too. I think
right.
the more cycles you live through, and then you get through them and you realize, wow, I'm still here and there are still opportunities, the easier it gets. So I think for um, people, younger professionals, younger business owners, they might be feeling like, wow, this is it, and what have I done? I think for some agencies, this might be the end of their agency as they know it. But others will come along. So if they are a true entrepreneur, then another business will be born out of this,
Correct.
or their agency will come back even better and stronger. Because I do think opportunities are born out of these types of opportunities, and leaders are born
Yeah.
out of these types of situations.
Yeah, and I think this is a good time for us all to think about what we really, really want. Because
Yes.
if you have been teetering at the edge of your agency and maybe you've been tired, maybe you've been doing it for a few years, and maybe this is the time where you actually want to go off and do something else. There will be, and there is going to be plenty of digital online marketing type work. It's just going to look different.
Yeah.
And
I
it
agree.
is okay as well if you're sitting at home right now and going, do you know, I really want to do something else. It's not too late. Because if you want to go back into your agency, you got to bring 180% of you back in. You can't half-ass it, as they would say over here, you know,
That's
right?
right.
You know, this
Yeah.
I feel is the easy part in the scheme of things. Staying at home healthy, if all is going well, this is actually easy because you're going to need all guns blazing if you go back into that agency.
That's a wonderful point, because your clients need you and your team needs you.
Oh,
And yeah, and I think the team especially. Absolutely. Wonderful
they
point.
will. Yeah, and they will. And if you've been like, not really feeling it, pull it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Find everyone jobs, go in-house, get your team into the in-house. It doesn't matter. It is okay, but
Yeah.
don't go back in kind of like, oh, I had my opportunity. Take the opportunity. With that in mind as well, it's something that you and I are very similar on when it comes to business development.
Yeah.
You would have seen a lot of agencies and a lot of agency owners still doing sales, and you ask them who's doing business development, and they tell
Yes.
you this lovely big Pinocchio lie, I'm doing business development, which we
Right.
completely know, which actually means I'm doing business development when I feel like it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me about the most important part of a business, which you and I are definitely aligned on. If you're in an agency, as soon as you can get out of that role, get out of that role.
Well, it's interesting. I'm going to present a bit of a contrary view, because what I realized, and even though I question it every single day, I think I still am committed to this belief. I actually feel that, especially for smaller agencies, that the CEO or the owner or the founder or whatever name you are using as a proxy to describe that top person, I believe that that person is the best business development resource a small agency has. And one of the things that I realized that I was helping agencies do is to sort of um, uh, get them back into that mindset. So I think you have brought up a really important issue and a big problem, which is that they either don't embrace the role fully, or they embrace it and they do things that they hate doing, so they never really do it well. And I was listening to one of your podcasts the other day, and I can't remember the name of the woman, but I think it was about mergers and selling your agency, selling your business.
Kathleen Booth, yeah, very
Okay,
early
yeah.
on, yeah, Kathleen.
And you guys are talking about how often an agency will get to a point and the owner, the CEO, will say, oh great, now I can offload everything on this new business person that I can finally afford to hire. And then of course they're setting that new business person up for failure because they're not supported in the right way. And so I think I think the CEO always has to be involved in business development. For a small agency, sometimes, like it or not, they may be they're going to be the primary person responsible for business development, but they're not the only person responsible for business development. So that's when I go in and I have a prescriptive approach where I really look at the strengths of the CEO, the strengths of the team surrounding that person, the goals of their growth goals, and develop a program that is best suited to their strengths, rather than like, here's what you do, rather than sort of a standard formula that everyone should try to embrace, because it's never going to work. You're never going to
Yeah,
get an introvert to do outbound sales calls. So
absolutely. Yeah,
find something else that they're good at doing that will help them, that will lead them to new business.
yeah. The agency owner will always be involved in sales, and I think from the side of point of view that we come from the
Mm,
HubSpot community, and I remember that call with Kathleen as well. We talk about business development as somebody comes in the morning and it's 9 o'clock and they go, hiya, how's it going? And they spend the whole day on LinkedIn, doing outreach, doing
mm-hmm.
email outreach. They have numbers to hit, 50 LinkedIn connections, 50 phone calls.
Right.
They line up the sale, they line up the conversation for potentially the business owner or the salesperson. But that job of activity on numbers,
Yes.
and a numbers activity, if that's the agency owner, there's always something more important than doing numbers for outreach. Right. That's what we talk about in that. Maybe the smaller agency owner can spend one day doing that, and that's what they do in the beginning. Yeah. But eventually you kind of want someone churning the machine.
That's right.
That does their job all the time.
Well, I think you bring up a really good point, and that the churning the machine is really a great, what you just described is great for a more junior employee who Correct. Would need to work really, really closely with that CEO. So
that's right. Yeah.
Or I've become a big fan of outsourcing. I think that there are a handful of well-qualified, well-run lead generation companies that I personally partner with, and if anyone wants to know who they are, I'm sure there's ways to get back in touch with me.
Please, absolutely. We're going to we will put Jody's details in the show here. Absolutely, yeah. But I think that is always a request. So great.
Yeah. So that is the kind of thing that you can outsource, but you also have to be well equipped to manage that, whether it's in-house or outsourced. Yeah. I think also where things fall down, what I notice is that you're either not equipping that person with the right materials. So as you know, if you have a weak pitch, you can make 100 LinkedIn connections a day and nothing's going to come out of it if you're not presenting yourself as an agency that solves a problem for a very particular type of client. So you have to have your story really straight for your lead generator. And then once those leads come in, I see the ball being dropped all the time. So you have to have a very clear buying and pitching process for how are you going to close that. And I either see agencies doing too much too soon, or they lose it on the scheduling, right? The lead generator comes back and says, I've got your ideal client wants to meet with you next week. Here are a few time slots. And the agency owner or CEO or leader says, oh, I can't do it then. Or it's just to not even get something as clear as when that person is available for meetings and make sure that your lead generator knows that. That's the kind of like rookie mistake that drives me nuts that I try to help my clients solve.
What do you think is behind that?
I think I think there are a lot of things, but the first thing that I come to is that an agency's pipeline, and we're talking about a type of agency. I think some agencies are very good, and a lot of HubSpot agencies have become proficient at sales, and they're used to having a pipeline and managing it. But for a lot of agencies, their pipeline consists of a lot of nothing, then a couple of pitch invitations, which they scramble to put together and react to, and maybe they win enough that keeps their business going. So they don't really understand what a pipeline is or what it looks like. They don't understand that there is a buying process, and there is like sort of a subtle dance that happens once that lead comes in and says, yeah, I might be interested in working with you. What do we do next? And that dance has to be led by the agency. But that doesn't mean dumping a bunch of credentials on them. It doesn't mean realizing like, oh, well, I want to schedule this appointment when I want to meet with them. It's having some of those tools in place before the leads come in. And I think it's because agencies just aren't that used to having a very full pipeline. So they haven't had to build systems around it.
And they haven't had a process like a sales process to go, okay, this is how it's going to go, blah, blah, blah. This is the content that matches that particular stage.
That's right.
It could also sound like, because the reason I'm asking is because I come from my first kind of real job, if you like, proper job, was selling for Dell. And that whole numbers, like everything, the whole day was laid out. So I'm kind of got into that. So perhaps the agency that when we're just talking generic here, when it comes up against that booking, they haven't had a corporate discipline day before. Yeah. So they're kind of, what do you mean booking something in advance? Because they've never been in a corporate structure before, maybe.
Well, I think just even a sales structure, and it's interesting that you say that. I think that also another thing that we have in common. My first job was working for a production company, commercial production company, so a little bit different from the corporate sales structure of Dell. But our business, we were selling to agencies, and I was I was trying to get them to buy our commercial directors and buy our post-production work. And it was pretty transactional, and it was a real numbers game. It was a lot of it was, a long time ago, so it was more phone calls and emails. But
Yeah.
any fear that I'd had about making a cold call was extinguished because I just did it all the time. And so that also later on made me really valuable for agencies, because most agency business development people are not brought up as salespeople.
Right. Well, a lot of people, especially when you start looking at even early to like mid to late 20s who grew up with an iPhone, a lot of people
Mm,
actually aren't proficient talking on the phone. It's a new skill. They're just so used to texting or sending a Snapchat video that actually having the phone call and being listening for the pause and reading someone on that. We grew up
yeah,
with phones. We had to communicate with phones and learn how to
yeah.
talk. So I think the iPhone has a little bit to blame there as well. And some of us just got used to it going, oh, I don't talk to anyone anymore, you know?
Right. Yeah. Well, I think that's the other thing with sometimes with agency leaders too. They think, well, I'm above that.
Hmm.
But I think you also bring up an interesting point about selling being, I think there's also this misconception. People think they have this idea of selling that's incorrect. And what I want my agencies to do is I want them to do everything that they possibly can do to market themselves, to promote themselves, to generate awareness of their agency so that qualified leads are coming in. So it's not selling once the lead comes in. It's really more about nurturing and closing. And that's much more about listening, asking the right questions, pausing, um, and so much less about selling,
Yeah,
which I
not
think is
selling, just
not
being
selling.
helpful. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a big believer in you can't sell anymore. People buy. So
Yeah,
get over it, you know? Like
that's right.
you're not if you think you're selling, you're not selling. You're just people are buying and they're going around shopping, they're getting their research, they're seeing of what you are online, and they're just going to call you because there's 70% there anyway. You know, they
That's
just want
right.
to have ask a
Yeah.
couple of questions. But it's fun. So if speaking of the phone, if the phone rang after this and it was somebody who said, Jody, I'm after seeing your website. What kind of business, what kind of person is your ideal client, and what kind of work do you love to do? What makes you go, oh, I
Mm.
really want to do that?
Yeah, so I'd say, I guess as I've sort of been alluding to, it's really the smaller agency, the CEO of a smaller agency. And I did an exercise for myself a few years ago that I recommend my clients do as well, where I sat down and when I realized that this profile was starting to emerge, I sat down and I started to write out a scenario. And it was almost like a love letter or a letter to a good friend who might be suffering. And I was
Mm,
imagining my ideal client. I was imagining the CEO of a small agency in a particular moment. And that moment is after they've, speaking of the phone, just gotten off the phone or just received an email from a potential client, a big pitch that they were in. They spent months preparing for it. They put all the resources of the agency against it. Their whole business development plan has been reacting to those pitch opportunities. And the CEO thought they had a fantastic chance. It was going to be a game changer of an account. And she's just gotten the call or just gotten the email saying, we're so sorry, but you are a strong number two, but you didn't get the business. And now she's got to go back out to her team who are exhausted and have probably neglected all their other work. They're a bit demoralized, and she's got to deliver this news. Not only does she have to deliver this news, but she's got to figure out how to get more opportunities. And does she really want to go back um, and do exactly what she's done in the past, which is call friends or few search consultants and try to get invited into pitches that are already happening, which are going to be a big creative shootout, which is not the type of process you can control? Or does she want to learn how to do something differently? Does she want to transform her approach and take control in the way that she needs to? And that's the kind of call that I love to get, where we sit
awesome.
down and we say, all right, let's figure this out. Let's figure out what you have that works. Let's figure out what's not working. And someone asked me recently, actually another podcast host, they said, what's your secret weapon? Or my superpower, or my superpower. It was my
Yeah.
superpower. And I'd never thought about that before. And I realized that it's X-ray vision. And I think my experience and objectivity allow me to come in and see things that agency owner has either never seen or has ceased to see. And that's a wonderful thing when you can recognize these hidden jewels, and you can start to get the CEO to recognize them again as well, and you polish them and you display them, and you watch then the business come in, and you watch them go from being desperate to being successful and in control. That's what I love.
Fascinating to give them that power, because I can imagine that is just so stressful,
Yeah,
ringing around asking for, oh, can you bring me into that picture, hoping that a picture, finding something, as opposed to, getting a ping, at 7 in the morning or 11 at night on your phone. You can actually see, oh, a new
yeah,
lead has been
that's
registered.
right.
And
Yeah,
someone who's never had that before, it must feel like such an empowering feeling to go, oh, there's things happening in my business without me, begging
yeah,
and
yeah,
hustling and doing all of
yeah,
that. What an incredible power to give somebody. And I
yeah.
think as HubSpot people, we've grown up in that going, that's what, we've known about lead generation for, God, 10 years. We've known
That's right. Yeah.
inbound, get leads, emails come in, pick up the conversation. To share that with somebody new. And do you feel it's easy for them to pick it up? Do they get their heads around it quickly, or do they keep it going? What's the sort of, is it an aha moment for them?
It often it is, and do they do it all the time? No. So it's often an aha moment that it's almost like, for all of us, we have to reinforce good habits. So
Mm,
it's not just it's not just hearing or reading or witnessing something like really good idea. It's then reinforcing it and putting it to practice. So I I actually started doing a program based on 12-week sprints. I call them my 12-week action intensives. And it's exactly because of this, because I would do these intense workshops where we would come up with this idea, or we would recognize, we would go back and polish those hidden jewels, and then nothing would happen. So I thought, right, let's take this workshop and we're going to add on to this a sprint, and we're going to give ourselves very clear milestones for this 12-week sprint. And often those milestones are not like, well, double revenue, because that's unrealistic, but it's, what did we learn here today? So how do we need to get to there? Well, maybe it's about maybe it's about redesigning the website so it's more of a lead generating website. Maybe it's about reworking the case studies. Maybe it's about going back into your CRM database and identifying what we have just described as the ideal client profile, and not pursuing, like, ranking those higher and ranking everyone else lower, so you're only focusing on the most ideal. Maybe it is even buying some CRM software so that
oh,
you
wow.
go from an Excel spreadsheet or a set of like sticky notes into something more formal. Yeah,
Amazing.
I think agencies have come a long way, but I'm still amazed at how many times I work with a client that says, well, yeah, I have HubSpot or I have another CRM, but I don't use it. Or yeah,
Wow. They don't get the machine working. It's
don't get
incredible,
the
isn't it?
machine.
It
Yeah,
is incredible. What are you kind of, as you're sitting looking at the landscape of what's going on right now,
yeah.
what kind of patterns or advice are you giving to your clients, or would you give? Can you share some of that sort of tips for people in, the same situation now? There's a lot of wait and see. There's a lot of what's going to happen.
Hmm.
What sort of advice would you give and what are you giving your clients as well? I'd love to hear.
Yeah. So I'm focused right now on just helping people come up with short-term, midterm, and long-term plans, and thinking about, I think right now we're so overwhelmed, and that certainly helped me. I think anytime I'm in a complex or overwhelming situation, applying a framework around it that just helps me. I don't want to make it sound like it's some sort of simple panacea, but it's a framework that just helps me sort things out. So on the short term, we talked about this a little bit earlier on. That's really more about the damage control and the
Hmm.
triage, and then it may be things like laying off employees. It may be things like reassuring those clients that you are equipped to continue to service their business. It may be pivoting your services a little bit to react to a client's needs, or it may be also reassuring those clients that are about to close that you're ready to take on their business. And then in the midterm, I think it's sort of getting prepared from a new business perspective, at least, getting prepared to go back into a relatively normal cycle of outreach and lead building, because I do think, I think for the first few weeks of this pandemic, we all went like we just got to stop everything.
Mm,
And now I feel like we're certainly not back to any kind of normality, but I also feel like for the people who can afford to conduct business as normal or as normal as possible, there's still this need, right? So they still have needs. Agencies are there to fill them. So the midterm has got to be more about like, how can we, like, for whom is it right for us to go out with our strategy and our messaging? And then
mm,
on the long term, I do think that now we have been given the luxury of time. Many agencies, I mean, many agencies, that's the ironic thing, is are busier than ever.
right.
But I think between now and when this all ends, we will probably realize we have more time than we normally do. And so on the long term, it's the looking at, like, what do I want my agency to be, and how do I want it to be expressed in the public domain? So that's looking at your positioning. It's looking at your new business materials. It's looking about how you tell your story. It's looking at your services and how they're described. Are you adequately communicating the value of what you do? And if not, why? And how can we improve that? So it's this wonderful silver lining, I guess, where agencies are given this opportunity now to redefine what they are, and really going back to basics and putting that stuff in place, making sure the materials are as strong as possible. So when we come out of this,
Yeah.
they're going to be stronger than ever.
Yeah, and you just bring up a very good point there. It's all the mechanisms are in place. Like
Yeah.
agencies know how to do a lot of things, right? So if we think of it primarily, they know how to get a message out to a large audience, right? For example, so if
Yeah.
you just take that. So if you were working with a restaurant chain or a restaurant before, and they are coming back, perhaps they've been in a situation where they've been supported,
Mm.
their coupons aren't going to be the message, but the look how our business is set up, look
Mm.
how we're taking care of you. The message to the audience, the message is going to be different, but the audience, it's still the same
Right.
thing. You don't abandon them to go, oh, well, the restaurant industry is a bit of a mess. It's like,
That's
no,
right.
they need more of your, get them to record a video to share it with you so you can edit it so you can send it out to their audience. It's now about reassurance. Somebody wants to know, as a family, can I go back to my restaurant chain? What are they doing? Oh, look, they've set up the tables. Oh, look, they've got printable menus. Oh, that's great. Now I feel confident to ring them and make a booking. It's things
Right.
like don't come in, make a booking. We are going to change for a certain period of time, but the restaurant doesn't know that you can help them do that unless you bring them and tell them, how are we going to
Right.
calm people down so they pick up the phone, make a booking, and come in and see you.
Yeah. And I think it also has to be authentic and true.
Yep.
I don't, you probably feel the same way. If I get one more email from a airline CEO that says that they're there for me, when they're, especially in the US, when they're getting massive bailouts from the government, and it's
Oh, are they?
yeah.
Oh, that's great. No, I haven't
Yeah.
had
So
any of that. I've had a few weird ones. I'm going, do you know who I am? It's like,
yeah.
but oh, that's a nice. It's not. Are they there for you? That's
Yeah.
nice. Are you going first class somewhere soon? Are you? Yeah, it has to be an authentic message. It's ringing as an agency owner, ringing that restaurant owner as a person. How are
Right.
you? Then
Yeah.
talking to them, how is your business? What are you worried about? What do you need a hand with?
Yeah.
Because if you drop these are my packages and this is how I do business, and think
Right.
differently, what is it? Message, audience. Like,
Yes.
and think education as opposed to, marketing and promotion.
That's right. I think
Mm.
also I was talking to the leader of at one of our trade groups, advertising trade groups, and he was saying, oh, I had a conversation with a search consultant, and he had this great idea that agencies should just go out and, I'm paraphrasing, but go out and give away their services for free to their ideal clients, and they'll buy a lot of goodwill in the future. And I had to say that really made me cringe, because I think agencies give away too much stuff anyway in the
So
pitch
much.
process.
Oh my
But
God,
I
yeah.
do think, however, I do think that there is an opportunity now to contribute, but contribute in a way that makes sense. So one of the things I'm doing is I'm offering a limited time on my schedule for free 45-minute consultations with any
Yeah.
agency leader that wants them. No questions asked, no sales pitch. It's just, let's talk for 45 minutes. For others, I heard about a great example of a social media agency that for one of their clients, worked with restaurants, one of their clients, they did a whole bunch of like quote cards, like quote card designs, like a little package, and just gave them to the client. And the client
Oh,
appreciated it so much that then they're now actually, the agency is doing it for other clients, making them as free downloads on their website. So I think it's sort of this, that's a really controllable but generous offer that says, we're here for you, we're doing the best that we can, but you can't also deny that you're still a business and you need to pay the
yeah.
bills as well.
Yeah.
And that if, and yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And a lot of agencies, what we don't often remember is the fact that we are very familiar with marketing technology and embrace technology. And a lot of us have been on
Yes.
Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, the whole lot. Like the minute I'm on TikTok,
Mm-hmm.
Jody, for no other
Yeah.
reason that it's my personality. I'm not doing dances or lip syncing, but my personality has been like that from day one. I was one of the first, I
Right.
think it's 2008, I was on LinkedIn or
Yeah.
something. Like I am a technology, I didn't grow
You
up
love
as
it.
a digital native, but I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'll give it a go.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just been that type of person.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of people are going, oh my goodness, no, I couldn't possibly learn how to do Instagram. I have friends my age who wouldn't even touch it,
Mm.
whereas and that's fine for them. They've no interest.
Yeah.
So I think what we've got, if you just sit down as an agency owner, it's the fact that you have an open, flexible and adaptable mindset
Yeah.
around this technology. Even
Yeah.
if that may be what your business looks like, is teaching people how to use Slack and how to communicate on Zoom, that is a whole big fat business of
That's
when
right.
companies need to learn how to work from home.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a wonderful point. Yeah.
Yeah,
For agency owners to both be willing to embrace the opportunities to learn new things themselves, as well as understand the things that people that need, that maybe they could adapt their services to provide.
correct. And a
It's a
lot
good
of
idea.
yeah, and a lot of what I've seen as well, a lot of American companies had
Yeah.
been very forceful in their years, perhaps
Mm.
for 5, 6, 10 years, have been telling their staff it is not possible to work from home. You are not
That's
able to
right.
do your job at home, right? And they were justifying, and they were and they had their reasons, and it had all. When all of a sudden, they either
Yeah.
had two choices: either let people figure out how to work from home, or you have to shut the business for an indefinite period of time.
Yeah, well, I think that's actually something else that the recession of 2008, 2009 helped prepare us for, because all of a sudden it was much more, it was necessary to, companies had to lay a lot of people off, and yet they also had to hire back a lot of those people as freelance gig workers. And I think the gig workers said, well, I'm not gonna go into an
Not
office.
going to the
So
city.
yeah, right, working from home, working remotely, and working in a sort of flexible manner. Our test run was during the 2008 2009 recession, and now we're like center stage. That all those things are center stage. And I think for folks, I've worked from home. I do have a remote office space as well, but I've worked from home for the last 6 or 7 years. So for me, I haven't had that much to adjust to, and I don't think I'm alone. I think there are a lot of other people out there. It just wasn't that odd. If this had happened in 2007, it would have looked very different.
Right. And we have set ourselves up. So speaking of the difference, I'm the same.
Yeah.
I have been working from home for solid 3 years now. Um, However, it's still, there's a pandemic. Right?
Yeah.
There's still kind of something going on. What kind of advice do you have for somebody, or has your routine changed slightly, or have you learned
Mm.
something that you went, look, this happened, my routine went a bit squiff, and I'm now back on track? Have you any
Yeah.
advice of how you normally would do things, and any tips for us? Because I'm always searching for tips.
And this is more sort of like work-life balance as opposed to new business stuff, right? Or
Mm,
yeah. So that is something that I found interesting. I found the joke at least over here, the joke about the COVID-19. So there's the freshman 15, where you put on 15 pounds of weight as a freshman when you go to college, especially women. It's, it's a bit of a trope. So now it's the COVID-19. So it's this idea that everyone's stuck at home and all they're doing is eating and baking and they're gaining weight. So I guess COVID 1 point something stone in our UK. But
thank you.
yeah, sorry.
for the equivalent. We'll translate for kilos for our Asia Pac audience. I'll be putting up, maybe that should be the title of the show.
So I think so for me, I think it's, again, I don't want to sound pat, but eating well.
Yes.
So yeah, setting up some good habits, about 3 meals a day that are healthy meals. It's also getting out of the house every day. So we're really lucky. We live in a place where it's easy to get out and go for a walk and not run into people. But I think that sort of daily exercise and daily just getting out, getting away from the desk. I think the other thing too, I have a very full day today, so I'm grateful for that. But the day was going to end this evening with a Zoom call with some friends of mine, just a little Zoom cocktail party. And I made the decision to cancel that because I thought I don't want to be on Zoom again at 6:30 tonight. I will have been on Zoom all day today. So I think it's also knowing when to step away from your computer, step away from your desk.
Yeah.
And I think, something that's on a very personal level that's been very helpful to me is having a meditation practice. I think that's when things start to get really, but I start to really freak out, just to go back and take a few breaths and be in a quiet moment is super helpful.
Yeah. I think you've raised something really important. It's about filling your own energy before you start to take on the world. We all know the minute you open the laptop, there's no such thing as a 5-minute job on your laptop when you work.
Right.
There's just no such thing.
Yeah.
And today
down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, it is. It's a total rabbit hole. You just go, I'll just send that email, and next minute, it's an hour later. So having that time in the morning to fill you up, to not open the laptop, or even better, not switch on the phone, like leave it all off for, try it for half an hour, and the next day for an hour, and the next day for 2 hours. If you can have as much off time, filling yourself up, the meditation, the stretches, the yoga, if you are lucky enough to go outside, or even just sitting looking out the window it doesn't matter what you do. It's to have some off time, as in for you. Is super important. And then one thing, I was just doing a couple of coaching calls with an agency that's obviously gone remote, and they're South Africa, and every person had the same thing. They were like, can't seem to stop working. And it's like, right, that's a big thing right now from people. So I've been watching people who've kind of seemed to have mastered it, but have we mastered it? Who knows? They might have mastered it this week. But this week, some of what I've noticed is setting a time to go, okay, I'm finishing working, and very well done. Saying no to the Zoom calls, that you just know that you're going to have no energy. If you're not looking forward to it, you're not going to have the energy for it. Right. You're not. So shutting the laptop at 5, 6 o'clock, and take a pen and paper and put it on top of the laptop.
That's a good idea.
If you think about something that is work related, write it on top of the laptop. Do not open the laptop.
That's a great idea. I'm going to totally borrow that, if that's okay. I'll give you credit.
No problem. Set a time going 5 o'clock, it's done. I'm laptop down, notepad and pen, and go off and do something with your hands. Washing, clean, mooching around, yoga, meditate, read a book, cooking. Some more banana bread, whatever you feel like. 4 pounds of it, But do something that's with your hand. And if something comes into your head, write that down. Do not open that laptop. So that's today's tip. We're all going to work on that. And you're welcome.
I think also laptop as well as phones, it also takes you away from the news. I've really been trying to limit my news intake. And I'm a bit of a news junkie, but it's so, I can feel sort of my mental state change as I listen. And
the more you listen to, the more you want to.
That's right. And the more depressed and stressed out you get.
Yeah, I have a very sort of unusual situation where my Facebook feed is just things so I go into the videos, right? And it's an accumulation of when I lived in Australia and lived in New Zealand, and obviously I'm home in Ireland, and I also follow things in the UK. So my video feed goes from what's going on in Australia, New Zealand, to up to Europe,
Oh,
to into the UK, to over to Ireland, to then when you guys come online.
oh, that's
And a bit of,
great.
oh, and a bit of Canada as well. So, like I'm researching that this is my specialized topic or something. And then some days I go, what are you actually doing? Like, why are you watching? I'll have it on in the background and I'm going, oh, that's
Yeah.
great now that the New Zealand Prime Minister is doing that. So I'm going, what are you doing? Like, this is crazy. So definitely
Yeah.
news off. And one thing that you said as well, which I loved, because I'm always asking about people how to manage work-life balance. You said that having breakfast with your partner is something that you've brought in as a tip as well. Tell me
Yeah.
more about how you've done that, because he's self-employed as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We actually typically have 3 meals a day together. So he's
Awesome.
self-employed. Yeah. And he's a bit old-fashioned as well. So that's good. I think if I were living on my own, I'd be much more likely or if I was living with someone else, be much more likely to be having things like breakfast and lunch while working, at my laptop.
Yeah.
So yeah, we just I don't know how to say to get into the habit except to do it. But yeah, we have breakfast together. We break for lunch, and typically we even ask, what's your meeting schedule like? What's your work schedule like? Come
Love
back, we
it.
make lunch together, and then we have dinner together. Yeah.
Beautiful. That I love that
So
work-life balance. And we'll wrap up with a tip. Usually, I have a tip for any advice you have for agencies. So you can be evergreen advice or advice for agencies of the lockdown life,
well,
whichever.
yeah. So I think I think I might go for the evergreen,
Let's do that.
and it goes back to something I said earlier. I think for agencies or for agency owners or leaders who are just not sure what is the right thing for them when it comes to growing their business, or they really are struggling with it, I'd say go back and don't be afraid to play to your strengths. And I think this really goes out to some of the more introverted, some of the more cerebral or sort of thought-based creatives. I think that there are ways that you can leverage that personality to attract more clients. And it might not be in the way that you have been typically told to do that, which might be around things like outbound, but create a new business strategy around what you do that you love, because it can be
Mm,
done.
brilliant advice. I absolutely agree. You can have the business of your dreams. It's just
Yeah,
about getting the machine right. Right?
that's
It
right.
doesn't have to be a nightmare.
Yeah.
And so many people have created their nightmare. They were going, I didn't expect it to be like this.
Yeah.
Jody, all the way from the Hamptons, thank you so much. I've really thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you today, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed it too. This was a great honor.
Goodbye, everyone, and I will see you very, very soon.